Most men don't get ignored because they lack value. They get ignored because they try to be nice. And the worst part is, they think that's the right move. They believe being respectful, agreeable, easy to deal with will earn them attention, earn them respect, earn them influence. But it does the opposite, because in most environments, nice is not perceived as strength. It's perceived as low pressure, and low pressure is easy to ignore. Watch how most men behave in conversations. They nod too quickly. They agree too easily. They avoid tension at all costs. They don't challenge. They don't hold their position. They don't create any resistance. And because of that, there's nothing to respond to. No weight behind their words. No edge in their presence. No reason for people to pay attention. They become background. Not because they're bad people, but because they remove everything that creates impact. That's the first mistake. They confuse being nice with being valuable. But value is not built on comfort. It's built on contrast. If you're always agreeable, you're predictable. If you're predictable, you're forgettable. And people don't remember what feels neutral. They remember what creates tension. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Most men are not actually nice. They are careful. They are controlled by the need to be liked. So they filter everything they say. They soften their tone. They avoid disagreement. They hold back their real thoughts. Not because they're kind, but because they don't want negative reactions. And that's where they lose. Because the moment your behavior is shaped by avoiding rejection, you stop leading the interaction. You start adapting to it. And people feel that instantly. They sense when a man is trying to stay safe. And safety is not respected. Now compare that to a man who doesn't operate like that. He's not rude. He's not aggressive. But he's not trying to be liked either. He says what needs to be said. He doesn't over-adjust. He doesn't smooth every edge. And because of that, he creates something most men avoid. Tension. And tension is what makes people pay attention. Not noise, not friendliness, not constant agreement, but the presence of something that doesn't bend easily. That's where the shift begins. Not in becoming less nice, but in removing the need to be liked. Because the moment you stop trying to be accepted, people stop ignoring you. Most men think being nice will protect them. They believe if they avoid conflict, avoid tension, avoid saying the wrong thing, they'll be respected. But what actually happens is the opposite. They become safe. And safe men are not taken seriously. Because when a man is always nice, people stop measuring him. They stop paying attention to his words. They stop considering his opinion as important. They stop seeing him as someone who can shift anything. Why? Because there's no risk in him, no unpredictability, no resistance, no consequence. And without consequence, there is no weight. Think about it. If people know you will always agree, always smile, always adapt, why would they respect your presence? They already know what you'll do. And once someone becomes predictable, they lose influence. That's the hidden problem with being nice. It removes tension. And tension is what creates engagement. It's what makes people listen more carefully. It's what makes people think before they speak. It's what makes interactions feel real. But most men avoid tension completely. They see it as something negative. So they soften everything. They turn disagreement into jokes. They turn opinions into questions. They turn statements into something safe. And in doing that, they dilute themselves. Now their words don't land. Their presence doesn't shift the room. Their energy doesn't affect anyone, because nothing about them creates impact. Now look at the man who operates differently. He doesn't seek tension, but he doesn't avoid it either. If something needs to be said, he says it. If something is off, he addresses it. If he disagrees, he doesn't hide it. Calmly, directly, without excess. And that changes everything. Because now, there's something to respond to. People feel the edge. They feel that he's not adjusting himself to be accepted. And that alone raises his position. This is where most men get confused. They think respect comes from being liked. But being liked often comes from being easy. And being easy is what gets you ignored. Because when there's no friction, there's no reason to engage deeply. That's why the man who is always nice is rarely remembered. He didn't create anything that stood out, nothing that required attention, nothing that forced people to adjust. And in a world where everyone is trying to be comfortable, the man who is willing to hold tension is the one who gets noticed. At some point, this stops being about behavior. It becomes about intention. Because the problem is not that a man is nice. The problem is why he's being nice. Most men don't act nice from strength. They act nice from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. So they adjust. They hold back what they really think. They say what sounds acceptable. They avoid anything that might create discomfort. And over time, that creates a version of themselves that is easy to deal with, but impossible to respect. Because nothing about them feels real. There's no edge, no conviction, no sense that this man will stand on something, even if it creates tension. And people feel that immediately. Not consciously, but instinctively. They sense when a man is filtering himself. They sense when he's trying to stay in their good graces. And that's when the dynamic shifts. They stop taking him seriously. They interrupt him more. They challenge him more. They ignore him more. Not because they're trying to be disrespectful, but because he has removed the pressure from the interaction. There's no consequence in how they treat him. Now compare that to a man who is not driven by that fear. He's still respectful, still controlled, but he's not careful. He doesn't filter everything to avoid reactions. He doesn't adjust himself to maintain approval. He doesn't hide his position to stay comfortable. And because of that, there's clarity in him. You know where he stands. You know he won't shift just to keep things smooth. And that creates something powerful. Not tension alone, but certainty. Because now people understand. This man is not here to be liked. He's here to be real. And that changes how they interact with him. They listen more carefully. They choose their words more precisely. They hesitate before dismissing him, because now there's weight behind his presence. Now here's the key most men miss. You don't need to become aggressive to stop being ignored. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to dominate every conversation. You just need to remove the need to be liked. That's it, because the moment your behavior is no longer shaped by that need, your words become cleaner, your reactions become slower, your presence becomes more stable. And stability is what people respect. Not friendliness, not agreeableness, not constant validation, but the ability to stay grounded, even when the interaction becomes uncomfortable. That's what separates a man who is ignored from a man who is taken seriously. At the end of it all, this isn't about being nice. It's about what your behavior communicates, because people don't respond to what you say. They respond to what they feel from you. And if what they feel is that you're trying to be liked, they adjust. They stop taking you seriously. They stop valuing your input. They stop seeing you as someone who can influence anything, not because you're weak, but because you made yourself easy. Easy to approach, easy to predict, easy to ignore. That's the trade-off most men don't see. They choose comfort in the moment and lose respect over time. Now here's the shift. The goal is not to become less nice. The goal is to become less dependent on being liked. Because once that dependency is gone, your behavior changes naturally. You stop over-smiling. You stop agreeing with everything. You stop softening your words just to keep things smooth. Not as a strategy, but because you no longer need the outcome. And that's what people feel. They feel that you're not trying to win them over. They feel that you're not adjusting yourself for approval. They feel that you're grounded, regardless of how they respond. And that creates pressure. The kind of pressure that makes people pay attention. Because now, there's something at stake in the interaction. Now your words carry consequence. Now your presence creates weight. Now your silence has meaning. And people start to adjust. They listen more closely. They interrupt less. They take your reactions more seriously. Not because you demanded respect, but because your behavior now requires it. This is the part most men never reach. They stay in the cycle, trying to be liked, trying to be accepted, trying to be easy to deal with. And in doing that, they remove everything that creates impact. But the man who steps out of that, who is still calm, still respectful, but no longer seeking approval, becomes something different. Not loud, not aggressive, not difficult, but solid. And that solidity is what makes him impossible to ignore, because in the end, men who try to be liked fade into the background, but men who are willing to be real, even if it creates tension, become the ones people can't overlook.